Hello, my friends! Today, I'm inviting you to draw a full botanical illustration of a clematis, from very first sketch to the final touches. This video is a speed-up version, so you'll be able to watch the entire process in one sitting, from the flower's textured center and layered sepals to the climbing stem and elegant leaves. But if you'd like to dive deeper and follow along with me step by step, I've created full-length tutorials with detailed explanations for each stage. You can find them on my Patreon in the Botanical Explorer tier. Now, let's get started! Grab your pencils, open your sketchbook, and enjoy this calm, creative moment with nature. I start the drawing by gently softening the extra lines using a kneaded eraser. For the first stage, I'm using a 2H pencil. That will be more than enough for now. Let's begin shading. I'm starting with the folds in the center of each sepal. At the top, I've added a photo reference to help you draw along with me and to show you exactly what I'm looking at and focusing on. Right now, I'm adding short vertical strokes near each fold. My goal is to imitate the texture of the sepals and mark those folds clearly. Just make sure not to press too hard with your pencil. Keep the lines soft and almost transparent. After we've added the folds on the sepals, let's now return to the central part of the flower. So I begin by gently sketching small rounded tips on each stamen. These little parts are quite noticeable in the real flower, and they help make the drawing feel more lifelike. Each stamen also has a thin stem or leg that connects it to the very center of the flower. Once all the stamens are in place, I softly darken the area around the base of each stamen. This helps create contrast and make the stems stand out more clearly. Now I switch to an HB pencil, or you can choose a slightly softer one, like B for example, and I start shading the tips of each stamen. If you look closer at the reference photo, you'll see that the tops of the stamens appear almost black. But instead of filling them in completely, I leave the center of each tip a bit lighter and shade the sides a little more. This gives the stamens a rounded look and adds realism. And now, we finally move on to the next exciting part, adding texture to the first sepal. I start by refining the outer edge of the sepal a bit. I'm also drawing a slight thickness along the edge. This helps to show that the sepal isn't paper thin, but actually has some volume. Now I'm adding short vertical strokes on each of those little folds. You may also notice that near the bottom of the sepal, I darken it just a bit. I do this to show that the sepal slightly curves downward at the tip. Now it's time to apply fine, random texture all across the surface of the sepal. As you can see, the direction of the lines goes from the edge toward the middle, and they form these tiny, almost stripe-like patterns. And just like that, take a look. We finished drawing the first sepal in the full detail. Now I take an eraser and lightly soften any areas where I might have pressed the pencil too hard. I want the texture to feel light and airy, not too heavy. And finally, I work along the very edge of the sepal. Well, great job! We finished drawing the first sepal, and now it's time to move on to the second one. The process here will be very similar. We're going to follow the same steps as before. So, we're repeating the same approach for each sepal, one by one. This is a very calm and meditative stage of the illustration. The more care and attention you give to each stroke, the more natural and beautiful the result will be. And there is one more important thing. I now add soft cast shadows where the sepals overlap each other. These little shadows create more depth and help the flower look even more realistic and three-dimensional. Okay, let's finish our drawing with a lovely bud to complete the composition. If we take a closer look at the shape of the bud, we can see that it's quite simple. It looks a bit like teardrop or even a small pyramid. So I begin by sketching that basic from lightly, and then I start adding short pencil strokes from the outer edge toward the center. Even though the bud is still closed, we can still see 3 gentle folds in the center of each sepal, just like on the open flower. Alright, I want to start with this leaflet here at the bottom of our illustration. Now I begin by marking the thickness of the leaflet along its edge. This little detail will make it look more realistic and give it some dimension. Once that's in place, we can add the main detail, the central midrib and the side veins. This part is quite simple. Just try to imitate what you see in nature. I start with the larger veins first and then move on to the smaller ones. I repeat the exact same process for the side leaflets. Now let's move on to shading. I begin by adding short pencil strokes from the center midrib toward the edges. Next, I add similar strokes, but this time from the edge back toward the center. I do this on both sides, the left and the right planes of the leaflet. Once that base layer is done, I work into each inner vein, adding short strokes around it to give depth and texture. I start with the larger veins and then move to the smaller ones. For the finishing touch, I go over the outer edge of the leaflet again to make the thickness stand out even more. You can even switch to a softer pencil here to get a darker, more pronounced contour. Perfect! We finished our first leaflet. Now we repeat the same process to the side leaflets too. Now let's draw the small stems that hold our leaflets. I start shading from the edge toward the center, first applying short vertical strokes. One side of the stem is shaded a bit darker than the other, and this contrast helps create a sense of volume and roundness in the drawing. Great! We've now completely finished the entire lower leaf with all its individual leaflets. Now let's move on to the leaf located in the upper part of our illustration. So, following our usual approach, let's work on each leaflet one by one. This part is a little time-consuming, but I believe that it's absolutely worth it. The result is a truly detailed, neat, and beautiful illustration. Alright, let's finish our illustration with some beautiful stems that hold small leaves, a neat way to complete our composition along with a delicate bud. Let's begin. First, I start drawing the bud itself. I shade from the edge toward the center with short strokes. To give it more volume, I add extra shading at the bottom of the bud, so it appears fuller and more three-dimensional. Next, I carefully shade the stem. Again, I make one side slightly darker and keep the other side lighter, which helps the stem look rounded and realistic. I also add little petals where they connect to the stem. At these connection points, I make the tone a bit darker to create more contrast and definition. Now, of course, we can't forget the small leaves. We already know the technique of drawing them, so this part becomes a pleasant, delicate detail in our illustration. And look, there is another little bud tucked into the lower part of our drawing. Here I follow the same steps. First, shading from the edge toward the center, paying special attention to lightly sketching the future petioles and tiny sepals inside the bud. Then I draw the stem and side leaves in exactly the same way as with the first bud. And that's it! Our clematis illustration is complete! Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I hope this video brought you some calm and inspiration and maybe encouraged you to pick up your pencils and capture something from nature today. Wherever you are on your creative journey, I'm truly happy you were here. Take care and see you next time. Bye bye.